So, as I've already alluded to, and that video even really talked about, we have been exploring this topic of baggage over the past few weeks. And last week we had the Palmer sharing, but the previous 2 weeks. And the working definition that we've been going with this idea of what baggage is this. You'll see it up here. It's that baggage is our life experiences, real or perceived, that cause us to act or react in ways that are less than God's best for each of us. That's kind of been our working definition. And through the last two messages, we've talked about, looked at how our painful and even experiences in the past, and then even some good experiences and events, like we mentioned Christmas and things like that, these give us baggage at times that we have to work through. And it's been a challenging topic, and I'm guessing that over these last few weeks you've had some opportunity to process some of your own baggage, and you realize there's a lot here to think about that relates to each one of us. And so as a brief recap of those first 2 weeks, just to get us back in the groove of what we're talking about here this morning, I want to offer you just a little recap in one sentence. And this would be my sentence of what we've really talked about. We need to set down the baggage in our lives and move freely into life filled with expectation and anticipation of what God has for us right now in His kingdom and into the future. And that's a pretty good summary. Wouldn't it be nice if each week I just gave you the summary statement and we said goodbye? But that's not how this works. You guys know that by now. But that's a good statement. That's a good recap of what we've been talking about. But right out of the gate this morning, I want to get real about something. Because there are many of us here in this room, many who are joining online, who we've been hearing a statement like that for so long. We've been hearing the whole, greener pastures are ahead. The best is just around the corner. We've been hearing that platitude sounding, God has a plan. We've heard that for a long time. And we're just flat out tired of hearing the same thing. I mean, we want to trust God. We do believe that God is good, and we desire to live in the freedom that Christ has promised. But we are just not sure how to keep going forward. And maybe for some of you, you feel like, I don't even know how to begin again. And so far, our baggage series has really been a look back at past experiences and then, all that baggage that we may have brought into our present day. But this morning, I want us to consider, what about the experiences that are still in process right now? What about the baggage that we can't simply set down because we are currently dealing with it? We are currently engaged with what is happening. Now, we all know people right now that are battling things like major illness, major sickness. We have people that are wrestling with a bad diagnosis. We have others that are dealing with some major broken family situations. We have others that are swamped with a huge workload and major financial stresses. And we have folks that are wrestling with some real doubts about this journey of faith. And maybe that person is you this morning. And just setting it down, it just won't help. Because you can't simply escape your current experiences that are in progress, and they're threatening to overwhelm each of us. See, the reality is when we are consumed by our current circumstances, and maybe you relate to a few of those that we just listed, it's normal for us to have some anxiety rise within us. That's normal. That's a human reaction. But this same anxiety threatens to cause us to withdraw from our critical connections that we all need, especially when our life events are overwhelming. So this morning, that's what we're going to look at. So if that kind of hit you heavy, the baggage topic is a heavy, no pun intended, topic. And so I want to discuss how we can actually lean into relationships in the midst of our present experiences, our present baggage, in order for us to keep moving towards freedom together. So this morning, to kick that off, when we're discussing how to honestly work through the current baggage in our lives, through leaning into relationships with others, there is something that we cannot afford to operate without. You see it right there. The crucial element is humility. Now, allow me real quick to give a bit of a disclaimer about being humble, okay? Because it's really easy to stand up here as the pastor, and if you got to be the pastor for the day, it's easy to stand up here and say, hey, be humble. But that isn't really helpful because humility isn't something that comes natural to many of us. Instead, I believe that life has a way of humbling each of us if we will slow down long enough to sit with our own experiences, acknowledging that we don't know it all, that we don't live life in a perfect way, and we shouldn't expect that of others either. The one thing that I have learned along the way that has been so helpful to me in terms of humility is not going to be any surprise to you. It's that we each need to be willing to ask for help. Yeah. Now, many of us, and I can sense by the little chuckles here in the room, no one likes to hear that. Because what that often looks like, it looks like exposing our weak spots. It is acknowledging our shortcomings, our less than stellar spots in our lives that we just can't do by ourselves. And when we have challenging situations, real baggage happening in real time, right now, boy, none of us really want another precarious chore like admitting that we can't do it alone. Because that means we have to come face to face with our own insufficiency. It means our bruised ego is exposed. And that same bruised ego is the one that is often trying to shield us from the risk and the vulnerability and the danger of being fully seen, of being fully known. And it's at that point that we have a choice to make. We can either duck out of all of our relationships, we can lean away, we can cling to our baggage, and we can stop participating with others, or we lean in with true humility so that we can begin to find help and we can even share help and we can move together forward. You see, living our lives as a participant in the way of Jesus takes an enormous amount of humility. And if you haven't discovered that yet, that realization's coming someday for you. It takes a lot. And this is something that Jesus knew and he modeled for us in becoming human and demonstrating a better way to live. And ultimately, he's reconciling the entire world to himself. A familiar text out of Philippians chapter 2 says this. It says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage." So why does humility matter as we discuss processing our current baggage together? Humility matters because humility leads to gentleness with one another. Humility is a connection builder. In 1 Peter 3:8, this is written, and I want you to notice these 5 connection building characteristics, and you'll see it here on the screen. It says, live in harmony, be sympathetic, love each other, have compassion, and be humble. Now, as we think about those, the first 4 are really built on that 5th characteristic, and be humble. And the reality is that is the best. It's the most excellent model for all of our relationships with one another, and certainly in our relationship with Jesus as we seek to honestly unpack our baggage. I want to share with you just a few more as we wrap up this little section on humility, that I want you to see a few healthy humility attributes that I found here online. It was actually on success.com, which sounds very nice. We all want to go to success.com here. But check these out. There's 4 of these, and these are good. This is healthy humility. The first one is you acknowledge you don't have it all together. That's got to happen. Next one. You seek to add value to others. Yeah. The third one. You take responsibility for your actions. That's something we learn in kindergarten, right? Probably even earlier at home. And then the last one here that we're going to share today is you are filled with gratitude for what you have. I mean, those 4, that's a valuable list right there for each of us as we're working through our current life challenges. And I wonder, you just really had a quick reaction there, and you don't have to shout this out loud, but what one of those you're like, yeah, I can do that work. Maybe I have a little humility in here, which if you're thinking of, don't pat yourself too hard because then you're not having humility. But consider that. Maybe 1 or 2 of those you're like, yeah, I'm working on that. But then I wonder, where did you see that I definitely need growth in that area of humility, not only for my own sake, but for the sake of those around me? After considering questions like that and assessing our own level of humility, we continue the work of honesty as we present our truest self to Jesus and we spend time with Him. And one of the best examples that I can think of that comes to mind is out of the Gospel of Luke. And this is another familiar passage for many here in the room. This is out of Luke chapter 10. It says this: as Jesus and His disciples were on their way, He came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to Him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what He said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And she came to Him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Now, I've preached on that message before, and you've probably heard many sermons on that topic. But the point I want to highlight today from this passage is the description of Mary. Okay, we get a lot of interaction, Jesus and Martha. But the picture there. In the midst of chaos, because to welcome Jesus, this was a group of people. This is not just, we had Jesus by Himself over for dinner. No, this is a production. But in the midst of all of that chaos, Mary is where? She's seated at the feet of Christ. What a beautiful picture that is. And it's a powerful example for us to see because Mary had assumed the posture of a true student, one who is all about learning, a student that is focusing in and she's listening well. She has taken the posture to see all that she can see from this rabbi, to be fully present in the moment so she can learn what there is to know about him and learn what there is to know about herself. See, in this moment, Jesus is acknowledging her. He's acknowledging her value, her identity, her right to be there and to listen and to learn, which, just to give us a quick side note, Bible times, women didn't get to do that. That was a man's spot, which tells me that Jesus is saying, everybody, you're welcome here. Come follow me. Be a student of me. And we too should be making time for Jesus. We sit with Him and His people. We take time to pray, and we take notes, and we journal, and we read Scripture, and we read other meaningful resources, and we tell Him the things that we're anxious about. We tell Him about the parts of our lives that cause us to worry and cause us to fear. And this is the discipline that was modeled by Jesus Himself while He walked among us on this earth. He would regularly make time to sit with all people. And He made time for prayer, and for stillness, and for silence, too. And just like Jesus recognizes in Mary's time spent with him that it's so good, he says it's not going to be taken away from her. Don't do that. We understand the same, that any time spent with Jesus and his people is time well spent. See, efforts made to learn from him and to go and then do likewise, folks, that's irreplaceable in our lives. Because this right here, to prioritize sitting at the feet of Jesus is to be seen and to be known. To be with him and his people is to, yes, be vulnerable and to risk revealing our current baggage. And isn't that exactly what we're doing? Isn't that why you've jumped online? Isn't that why you've gathered here this morning, right? Is that we come to lean into these relationships. We bring the willingness to speak needs, to speak wants and desires, and to speak our baggage out loud. And we do it together. So as we think about that, I wonder if anything's already just sparked a way this week that you could be more intentional about spending time at the feet of Jesus and being with the people that he loves. What heavy baggage are you maybe carrying around that you've been trying to shield from Jesus so that you wouldn't have to be fully seen or fully known? Maybe like Martha, it's just busyness, so you don't have to sit still. Guilty. Now this next little bit here, we've discussed this next topic in both of the previous messages in this series. So it probably isn't a surprise then that trust is a significant element in the process of dealing with our current heavy circumstances. And admittedly, I know that trust takes time, and for some, that doesn't come very easy. A little while back, I had a good conversation with a pastoral colleague, and from this conversation, the trust level took a big hit because this person is someone I value, and so in the midst of our conversation, I shared very openly, very honestly with them. And it was with the understanding this was a private conversation. You know where this is headed. Now, it wasn't anything like crazy, off the charts, wild, radical stuff. But I found out later that they had gone and shared our conversation with another group. But the people I found out from weren't part of that group that got the story shared with them. So I actually got it from a secondhand source, meaning this conversation had made quite a loop to get back to me. And I was bummed. And bummed probably isn't actually the right word there. That's pretty soft. I was hurt. Legitimately hurt. Because now I had to really consider how freely that I was going to share with this person in the future, right? And that's not how I want to live my life. And I know that that's not the way that we all move forward together towards a real and true freedom. That said, though, this is what I've learned through experiences like that. It's not like that's the only time that's ever happened in my life. What I've learned through experiences like that is that ultimately trust is at the heart of everything we believe and everything we do. In his book titled The Speed of Trust, Stephen Covey says this, and this is a little bit of a long quote, but you can follow along. He says this, low trust causes friction. Low trust is the greatest cost in life and in organizations, including families. Low trust creates hidden agendas, politics, interpersonal conflict, win-lose thinking, or what I would call zero-sum thinking, defensive and protective communication, all of which reduce the speed of trust. Low trust slows everything. It slows every decision, every communication, and every relationship. I wonder, have you ever experienced low trust in your life? That probably is a little bit of a duh question. Have you seen the damage that it's done? If you think about your relationships, have you seen how low trust impacts your relationships? Has low trust caused you to ever pull back from people, even in your greatest times of need? This same author goes on to say, simply put, trust means confidence, and the opposite of trust is suspicion. Are you a suspicious person? Think about that just for a quick second. Are you a suspicious person? Are you just waiting for someone close to you to let you down again? Or maybe you're suspicious of God. You're just waiting for Him to take something good away from you. You're just waiting for Him to punish you for something you did. And maybe that's how you view God. You see Him as angry, as full of vengeance, or full of retribution. And maybe you see people as obstacles to getting what you want in life, because you've experienced too much hurt from people to ever trust another person again. Now, we've discussed this many times, but I just want to remind you that each of us is going to experience trouble. We're all going to face some adversity, and we are going to go through frustration. No one is immune to the full human experience. You've heard me say those words before. None of us gets to avoid that. And the problem is, though, sometimes when we search too hard and too long for explanations as to why awful things happen, we run the risk of making up an explanation by mistake. And for many followers of Jesus, this is what I mean. That means we try to explain away all of it by placing cause and effect and blame and responsibility on God. Or we place the blame, responsibility on others. My encouragement for all of us, and I had to type this down, by the way, so I sat with this all week, is that we should not be looking for every explanation, for all of the reasons and all of the details for why our experiences have happened and why we're in them right now. Instead, let's be people that lean into trust in order to grab hold of the promises that we do get to enjoy as children of the Most High King. You see, trusting is active. It's an involved letting go. It's a setting down. It's a moving forward. It's a leaning into relationships with others, more than it is white-knuckling it through a blind fall and just hoping for the best. A familiar passage that I cling to is Romans 8:28. It says this, and we know that in all things, that's all things, even the really crappy experiences, even the brokenhearted, even the low trust moments, we know in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Folks, I know that sounds like a platitude when we quote Romans 8:28. Maybe we just need to sit with that. See, we need to trust Jesus today. And the hard part is you're going to need to trust Jesus tomorrow and the day after. We need to be honest with Him about the challenging baggage that we are processing right now. And we need to lean into our relationships with God and with other people with a courageous vulnerability that cuts through the fears that we carry with us so that you and I can actually embrace a real freedom together. So as we wrap this up, it's always hard to put in well, what's an actionable step? How can we actually lean into relationships in the midst of our present difficulties, present challenging experiences? How can we do that in order to keep moving towards freedom together? And this morning, I want to remind you of a few things. Participation matters. You see, I want to remind us of 3 of our basic needs that are actually met through participation in a faith community. And the first one is belonging. See, having a sense of community helps each of us to be our truest selves while we work at embracing others and their truest ourselves as well. And this is why I brought up humility, because humility is so valuable in a community of faith because it actually moves us to embrace one another's most positive traits and still see their significance in the midst of that. When we belong, we know that we can be known and trust that we are welcomed here, that you matter here, that you belong. The second is support. See, when each of us is struggling with our current realities and our present baggage, we recognize that we don't have to go it alone. Whether it's a phone call from someone that was just the right time, or a chance to get together for a meal, or maybe it's just a shoulder to cling to when you can't stand on your own anymore. It's a reminder that we are not alone and that we are truly seen, that we are indeed valuable and others are there to help us each as we go through some of the most difficult experiences. Folks, you can ask for help here. And you can trust that people will be there to help you too when you ask. Then the third one is purpose. You see, in the family of God, each of us not only gains that support and that belonging and that encouragement, but each of us also gives it as well. And I know that our experiences would teach us that this is true, but maybe you and I, we need the reminder that helping others gives our own lives significance and purpose. Here in this place, there is a spot here for you to contribute. You're not overlooked. You're not ignored. You aren't lacking. And together we can help one another discover what we can do. Now, it's true that our present anxieties and baggage do threaten us to move us away from others. Okay? They often press us to withdraw from the very communities and the connections that we need most. So if any of those three fundamental qualities of community are important to you, then how do we take that and how do we lean into these valuable relationships that we have better? See, the reality is if we want more trust, if we want more freedom, if we want more meaningful relationships, we have to do the work of unpacking our baggage and moving forward together. This is what we've been talking about. It's not anything new, right? You've heard these similar topics your whole time you've ever been in church, probably. And this whole series has been a reminder that we ought to be doing the work that we already know to do. See, so many times I think we just wait for God to move in some kind of really obvious way. I mean, that is nice when that happens. We are waiting for Him to say something. Essentially, I think we want God to just do it for us. That would be better. But often the truth is this, that He is waiting on us to do the some things that He has been directing us to do all along. See, participation matters. And it is going to absolutely take intentional effort. And it will take your time. And you're going to have to be really honest with yourself. And you're going to have to be really honest with God. And you're going to have to be honest with others. And you are going to have to show up. And because I am the pastor, I get to wear that hat. It's a really cool hat, by the way. Very cool. I want to go first. Because if I'm asking you to consider that you would carry your current baggage, okay, your current experiences with open hands, not clenched fists, not closed off. I know there's nothing more nerve-wracking than being a transparent doubter or someone struggling in the midst of a group of Christians. That can be some of the scariest moments. So I want to share just for a brief moment here that lately, I've really been struggling with, there's no way to get around it, anger and irritation, a lot of impatience in my own life. And it's the kind that like when you're doing a simple task and it doesn't go the way you thought it should be going, you like unload and you're mad. Like putting the stupid cap on toothpaste. Some other threads get messed up. And I'm having bad moments with the stupid toothpaste. When I'm just driving to the store or somewhere here in town, but it just feels like everyone apparently is on the road at that specific time. Always happens. And I've been on edge. And through some silence and stillness, I'm doing what I would encourage you to do. Through some really honest assessment, I'm finding that I am actually just wrestling with a lot of doubt. Specifically, I find myself asking if any of the things that I'm doing in life matters. Does any of this matter? And then because like I said, I get to wear that pastor hat, that means this is a huge portion of what I would say my identity and my life is. And so then I ask, the question is, any of the stuff that we're doing here as a church community, does it matter? Because just in the past few weeks, and really it's just the last week, we had a really great concert down here, just down the street, with John Tibbs, and it was a community event. We've had backyard barbecues over the last couple weeks. We've had a food truck. We've had church services. And I'm wondering, does any of this matter? Folks, I want to be really honest this morning, and this isn't to chastise, but I want to challenge you and be honest with you. We have a food truck that is hemorrhaging volunteers for the 11 and a half years I've been here. Hemorrhaging volunteers. We are at a bare minimum of what we can do. I love the food truck because we have an opportunity to touch the lives of 60 to 120 families every month. But I want to be very candid. The food truck ain't going to last. We're low on volunteers. And I believe it matters. So I want to be honest with you. And so I wrestle with that. Where is everybody? Can folks not make a commitment? Or what do we have to do here? I had a lot of folks at the beginning of the pandemic that were really irritated because we weren't meeting in person for the first little while as we navigated what we're still navigating, by the way. People were angry, frustrated. I had a lot of emails and phone calls and text messages. And again, I'm not throwing shade at anybody, but everyone was clamoring, we got to get back to church. And a lot of those same faces haven't been very plugged in the last 6 months. I'm asking the question of myself. I know you're asking the same question of yourself. Does this matter? Is what I'm doing mattering? I know I'm not alone in that. We're all doing that, right? Participation matters, and this is why I know participation matters. Hear me out. This is why I know. This is a Matt Stone moment, but I think it involves all of us, right? It's this, is that when I'm doubting, when I am struggling, there isn't anything that gives me a greater sense of belonging, a greater sense of support in a place of purpose than when we gather together. It could be at Lynn Kehoe's house in her backyard for a backyard barbecue, playing hoops and getting sweaty because it was humid. Man. It could be down here for a John Tibbs concert. It could be here on Sunday mornings. Folks, but it's when there's real life that's being exchanged. It's when there's real connections. It's when there's real conversations are shared. And I'm so thankful. I want you to know that if any of that came off heavy, you guys don't know the way that it encouraged me when you show up. When you show up. Because then I recognize that what we are doing matters. Participation matters. Leaning into a community of faith, it matters. And so this week, I just want to give you a few last things here. Maybe that this week for you, a new leaning in, even in the midst of carrying baggage around that you are in process of. Maybe it looks like taking time to make a few phone calls, to connect with a few of the people that you have lost touch with maybe over the last weeks or months. For some of you, we already hit this, but maybe it looks like asking for specific kinds of help. We're in August. School's coming soon. Maybe you're a parent that you need help with either drop-off or pickup for your students. That specific kind of help that you can ask somebody for here in this community. Maybe it does actually look like a renewed focus on committing to being part of our community functions. That's Sunday mornings, but there's other times too. Them. Maybe it looks like a new group activity in our community. That could be things like a Zumba class, right? Stuff like that. We've got a bunch of pickleballers here in this church that love to get together and play sports together. That could look like community center classes that are always offered. Maybe it's going and introducing yourself to your neighbors and just making a connection. Maybe it's a random act of kindness, or it could even be taking a college class out at MCC. Folks, I don't know what participation needs to be done this week, but we have to do this work. Even in the midst of feeling weighed down and overwhelmed by our baggage, if we lean out and we duck away from one another, it will not get better, because the price we will keep paying if we don't do the work of participation is unhealth. Unhealth resulting in a continued lack of true joy, true freedom, and true connection. And as people, as a gathering, as one local church, part of the Big C church worldwide, that's the kind of baggage that we absolutely have to walk away from. This morning, my challenge to each one of us, including myself, is in the midst of all that is currently weighing us down, the doubts, the challenging experiences, to lean in so that we can experience together belonging, support, and purpose. This morning I want to just take just a moment to sit in a little bit of stillness as a response or a reflection time. We don't really do closing songs all that often. We're not going to do one today, but I just want us to consider, what does it look like in our lives right now to lean in and to fight the urge to duck out when times get hard. So let's just sit together here for a few moments as we consider that, and then we'll pray and close our time.